Hello everyone, this is Dr. Supriya Singh from the Department of English, Vasant Kanya Mahavidyalaya, affiliated to Banaras Hindu University. I welcome you to the lecture third of week 3, and the title of the course is Understanding Deconstruction, a Critical Approach, whereas the title of the present lecture is A Deconstructive Reading of Dhruba Hazarika's Luck. In the previous two lectures, what we have done is that we have gone with the deconstructive reading of Jane Eyre and White Sargassoti, where the deconstructive reading was from the perspective of feminism as well as post-colonial lens. Whereas in the second lecture of this particular week, we did the deconstructive study, or we used the deconstructive tool in order to apply it on the short stories of Mahashweta Devi, where we had selected two short stories, The Breast Giver and Draupadi. And here we had seen, or we did a deconstructive study from the perspective of feminism, as well as we also included the caste and class notion so as to discover or explore how deconstructive reading has also explored a fourth ignored world of women, where according to Gayatri Chakraborty's Spivak, we have seen that the tribal women are doubly marginalized as well as their voices are not heard. Now, in this particular lecture, we are again going for a deconstructive reading of the short stories collection by Assami writer Dhruba Hazarika. In this particular lecture, that is lecture 3, we are going to do a deconstructive reading of Dhruba Hazarika's collection of short story called Luck, where we are going to do a deconstructive study from the eco-critical perspective. And there are 9 stories, however, we are going with only few ones because of the time constraint. So let us start. Let us see that Dhruba Hazarika was born in the year 1956 in Shillong, Meghalaya, and is an acclaimed Indian novelist and short story writer who writes in English. Hailing from Assam, he is a pioneering writer from Northeast Indian literature who authored novels like A Bowstring Winter in the year 2006, Sons of Brahma in the year 2014, and a collection of short story, Luck, published in 2009. All these novels and stories were set in the Northeast, exploring human environment relationships and regional identity with vivid storytelling. Now, proceeding to the book, let us see that this particular lecture is going to deal, as I told you just now, with a deconstructive reading of Dhruba Hazarika's Luck. It is a collection of 9 short stories set in the lush landscape of Assam. It involves exploring the binary oppositions, ambiguities, and underlying assumptions to reveal how meaning is constructed and destabilized endlessly without any final established meaning or notion. Deconstruction, as theorized by Jacques Derrida, seeks to expose the instability of meaning by questioning hierarchies, particularly, as well as by exploring the interplay of presence and absence that we are going to discover in this particular work. This absence and presence, particularly in the way how these stories privilege certain concepts over other. In this particular book, or the stories in the book, Hazarika's exploration basically deals with the human animal relationship as well as the nature and human identity that provides ample and a fertile ground for deconstructive analysis. Now, why I'm saying fertile ground? Perhaps this word has been intentionally used by me here because we find ample opportunity to deconstruct the various notions, and the term fertile here has been used to display the wild setup in which the stories are rooted, as well as to highlight the idea that there is no civilized system of hierarchy that has been followed by Dhruba Hazarika. For instance, it is very much like a forest where you can see that stories are very much like wild crops. They have been raised randomly in nature. The way crops are raised in nature, here you will find that the random, the wild, the forest like nature is there where these stories has been raised and set up. And therefore we find no binary setup here, because in the random forest naturally there is no system, no civilization, and hence no hierarchy. And this way we find that the human animal binary, which is almost seen in all the traditional works, gets destabilized here in this particular work. However, these stories are not overturning these hierarchies, rather, they go on to move to the second and then to the third stage of Derridian notion, so as to dismantle the binary at all, like a random growth in forest. So neither human nor animal or even non-human nature has been given primary position. So all of them, whether it is human, animal or nature, we find that sometimes human, sometimes animal, or some other times nature gets the primary position, and then some other times this hierarchy or this positioning gets dismantled. So this way we find that the deconstructionist approach can be seen in the various stories. Now, here, these stories this way challenge various conventional notions like notions of civilization, of morality, and agency, while simultaneously reinforcing and subverting these concepts. So, this lecture basically aims to analyze how humans are portrayed in relation to animals as well as in relation to nature. Now, here in the very beginning, it is to be noted that the reading should begin with Murat Ildan's idea, where he says when animals behave like humans, or when humans behave like animals, don't be surprised, because in every animal there's a human, and in every human there's an animal. Now, similar to this, humans, non human animals, where one is having a prevalent presence, we find that many a times in history it is frequently seen that animal oriented texts have been written. However, they are seen mostly from the lens of human eyes. In various fictional works, we have seen that these animals or nature have given secondary position. They are treated as secondary characters interacting with human protagonists. However, when we come to Dhruba Hazarika's this particular book, Luck, with 9 short stories, we find that this particular book offers a straightforward yet sincere portrayal of the evolving relationship between humans and non human animals. These stories depict animals in a naturalistic manner and explore common situations that resonate universally. Reading Luck brings us closer to animals, as each story put forward a minute introduction and detailing of one or the other animal. So this way we see that there are various stories. As I told you just now that there are 9 stories, and in all these stories we find that one or the other animal is there. Somewhere it is the leopard, somewhere it is the pregnant doe that has been killed by the human beings, somewhere it is uh, egret, somewhere it is a dog named Ghosty. Everywhere, even there is pigeon. So everywhere there is one animal or a bird is in center, and you will find that the center is not just a position. Rather, we have seen that how Dhruba Hazarika has minutely, delicately presented the things from the point of view of animals also, how they are feeling, how they are suffering. So Dhruba Hazarika, being a human, has tried to see the other side also. He has tried to capture the viewpoint of animals also. Now, apart from nature, we can see that nature is there not in a subjugated form, not as a background only. Rather, Dhruba Hazarika has used nature as a character, and from pages to pages there is a detailed description of nature, so that feel we as reader feel ourselves in that particular scenario. We set ourselves in that particular scenario, and that is going to create a big impact upon the psychology of human, or to relate ourselves with that culture, with that particular social arena, cultural arena. And we get into we get so much involved into the story that when we look upward from the book, we find ourselves in a very different zone. So here, locating the animals in the center, we find that there is a concept of post-human animal studies in the text. Now, locating post-human animal studies in a wider perspective, we find that the later phase of modernism questions this binary where human beings were in center. It questions the human oblique non-human hierarchical positions, particularly using Derridian notions of binary opposition. And this is the center of our lecture, that how we are going to dismantle this binary, and how it has been dismantled by Hazarika himself. Now, here the lecture is trying to create a space to study Hazarika's luck, this particular book, dismantling the straightforward distinction between the human and animal. So, here we see that these stories take into consideration animal subjectivity and animal gaze, as it has been discussed in the light of Derrida's theatrical essay, The Animal That Therefore I Am. This particular radical essay is actually a crucial contribution to contemporary animal studies, where the title deliberately plays with Descartes' assertion, where he says, I think, therefore I am. Here we can see that it brings post-humanism to the fore so as to erase distinction between human and animal by focusing on the politics of representation of the animals. It is in 1970s particularly that the revaluation of the human-animal relationship started, and a number of animal-centric issues were thought about. For instance, animals' habitat, extinction of few species, using animal as labor and their pathetic treatment, their commodification for humans' recreation, their consumption, and so on has been discussed in the critical arena. So it is with Derridian notion of deconstruction, or with such post-structuralist studies, we started to look for the other side, and we saw that how till now in the traditional literature we were not focusing on the gaze of animals, rather we were just focusing on human gaze. And that is why we miss how this degraded or how this disturbed the ecosystem, because we were till now using animals from our point of view. Now here this with the arrival of the theory of deconstruction, or with the arrival of the post-structuralist idea, now we are in a position to question this hierarchical notion and to see things from the other lens. Now, coming up to the oppressor-oppressed relationship, let's see that the term came first under the post-human studies by H.P. Blavatsky. However, Carey Wolf brought in the humanist approach of binary opposition between human and animal. Post-human animal studies rejected the traditional hierarchy with man at the top, which was there in tradition. So this way, teaching his language and manner to animals was a kind of notion that was common to all. It rather tends to develop a rich understanding of animals through comprehending, entering, and participating for new possibilities in the animal world. It started looking at animals from a different perspective. This post-human animal studies gained much significance, particularly in the light of the Derridian structuring of human oblique non-human. Here we can notice that the first term is capable of speech, of reason, experience, emotions, tears, respect, lying, laughter, culture, institutions, clothing, technique, etc., and so on. This way, they are brought to the fore through negative determinations of the animals. And thus, we have several instances of writings and screening animal centric as well as animal oriented works, such as documentary film The Elephant Whisperer, that won an Academy Award in the Best Short Documentary category of Oscar in the year 2023. Here in this particular documentary, we have seen that how a strong bond is shown developing between the couple and the elephants. The documentary not only explores the animal emotions and their bond with humans, rather, it also throws light on how the life of tribal people is particularly in harmony with nature. Along with it, the documentary also showcases the Indian culture and the conversation of traditional environment. However, we would be discussing this particular documentary in the next lecture, because the next lecture is a kind of deconstructive study upon movies where we would be discussing All We Imagine as Light. Apart from this, we are going to discuss another movie, that is This Ship of Theseus. And along with that, we are also discussing this particular documentary, The Elephant Whisperer. So we would be dealing this particular documentary in the next lecture in more detail. Now, coming to the stories in this particular book, we find that the very first story is The Hunt. However, all these stories in the book are set in the semi-rural Assam, and all these stories explores a gamut of possibilities in human-animal encounter. However, coming to the very first story titled The Hunt, we see that the storytelling takes on a symbolic role connecting a human figure with an animal. The story revolves around a group of people who embarked on a deer hunt in a natural setting. This story underscores humanity's unchecked dominion over the non-human realm due to its reason and technological progress that human beings have. The pristine environment, however, inhabited by animals here becomes disrupted by the intrusion of humans, machinery, and weapons. Now, ultimately, we see that there are four individuals who set out into the forest with the aim to hunt a deer in the early hours of the morning. However, the excitement and the sport of the hunt are damped when they come to discover that the shot deer is actually pregnant, and when they found the three fetuses were in the killed deer's womb. The presence of a doctor in the group triggers an emotional turmoil, given his own tragic experience of losing his wife during childbirth. Thus, here the doctor can be seen as a trace in the deconstructionist tool, and here the trace of doctor can be interpreted with a profession of having mastery in saving lives, actually failed in saving his own wife's life, as well as his profession proved ironical in killing a pregnant doe and hence endlessly differs. So here we see how the trace of doctor seems differ. The poignant scene of the doctor, who is symbol of intellect and reason, lying atop the slain doe, evokes sympathy and highlights the shared vulnerability of all living beings, thereby suggesting that hierarchies of life are artificial in this wider realm of universe. This destabilization extends to the concept of civilization also. These stories critique the notions of humans as civilized and animals as savage by juxtaposing humans' cruelty and emotional turmoil with the instinctual simplicity of animals. However, in front of our eyes, this seems to get destabilized, overturns, and this way dismantling the hierarchy. This, at the core of luck, is the binary opposition between humans and animals, which Hazarika both upholds as well as destabilizes. The stories often present animals like there are, as I told you just now, that there are other animals like pigeons, there are egrets, leopards, hens, and all of them, the animals that I have just mentioned, they act as catalysts for human self-discovery, suggesting a kind of hierarchy where animals serve as mirrors or moral guides for human behavior. Now, coming to another story, that is luck, we see that it is the title story, and here, particularly, a solitary bachelor interacts with a pigeon named Luck, and who teaches him about patience and the pain of loving a wild creature. Thus, the animal here is an agent for human emotional growth. Now, we see that the narrator actually is a lover of bird from the very beginning. He used to love birds and animals as well as human beings, and many a times he tried to tame a bird or an animal, but feels that his house is tabooed for birds and animals and even for humans, and that is why he is a loner, because nowhere he was successful in taming any bird or animal till now. Right now, however, he is living all alone while doing his job. However, by chance, one day a pigeon comes and survives, and this brought the protagonist back to life and proves lucky for him. This story thus establishes a bond between the narrator and the pigeon and simultaneously brings happiness in his life, before which perhaps his house was considered as cursed, as no pets before this lucky pigeon, whom the narrator named Luck after this. So, the earlier we see that all the animals or birds either flew or died, leaving the narrator all alone and sad. However, when we come to this particular pigeon, we find that it does not only gives comfort to the narrator, but also provides company and feeling of completeness to him. In the company of this particular bird named Luck, the narrator learned to do so many things for the first time in his life. He invited his neighbors and his wife for lunch, and even his communication with his colleagues began to be better. This way, we come to understand that this luck or this particular bird brought him not only mental comfort but also taught him important values of life. And this way, the story Luck explores a symbiotic bond between the narrator and a tamed pigeon named Luck. However, we also see that when it gets badly wounded, the narrator assumes a paternal role, offering care and comfort to the wounded pigeon. However, Luck's eventual departure in the end, when he flees away, it signifies the innate wild instinct. And this way, the story actually ultimately mirrors a biographical account of Luck's transformation, filling a void in the narrator's life with its lineage. Furthermore, the narrative also highlights the futile human attempt to confine natural life to human agendas, reflecting on the complexity of relationships between human and non human creatures. Now, therefore, this way, in the similarly in chicken fever, we also see that there is a magistrate named Ratandev Burman, and he was in love with his